with explaining Kim Jong-un's schedule while he's in Hanoi for his big summit with President Trump. 2 U.S. warships sail close to islands claimed by China in the disputed South China Sea. The move could negatively impact their ongoing trade talks. Plus, President Moon Jae-in is set to address the significance of and his expectations for the regulatory sandbox that's been implemented for the first time in an effort to boost South Korea's sluggish economy. Let's begin with the second North Korea-US summit set to be held later this month in Hanoi. We have confirmation now that Vietnam's top diplomat is paying a 3-day visit to Pyongyang starting today. There's speculation he'll discuss details to invite Kim Jong-un to Vietnam as a special guest of the state. Our Kim Hyo-sun starts us off.
Vietnam's Foreign Minister Pham Binh Minh is visiting North Korea from February 12th to 14th ahead of this month's planned summit in Hanoi between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump. While no details have been announced, the spokesperson for Vietnam's foreign ministry said via Twitter on Monday that such a visit comes at the invitation of North Korean Foreign Minister Sewol-ho. It looks likely that the Vietnamese foreign minister will be discussing Kim Jong-un's specific itinerary when he's in Hanoi. He could also sit down with Kim, amid speculation the North Korean leader could visit Vietnam as a guest of the state. If this takes place, a North Korea-Vietnam summit could take place either before or after the much-anticipated Pyongyang-Washington summit. This would be another significant diplomatic event for Pyongyang alongside the North Korea-US summit itself. Meanwhile, Sewol-ho visited Vietnam in November last year to benchmark Hanoi's Doi Moi, or the Economic Liberalization Initiative. When Kim Jong-un visits Vietnam, he will become the first North Korean leader to do so in some 5 decades. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
So let's stay with the second Pyongyang-Washington summit that's going to happen in a couple of weeks in Hanoi, as we just heard there, to work towards reaching hopefully a concrete deal on denuclearization. The two sides, that being the United States and North Korea, are set for more working-level talks over the coming days, right up until the summit itself, to make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible and we get some tangible results. Park Hee-jun reports.
With only 2 weeks remaining until the second North Korea-US summit, a key question remains. Will North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump forge a deal that can satisfy both sides? North Korea and the U.S. are searching for a balance between what Pyongyang should do to fulfill its commitments toward denuclearization and what Washington should offer in return. Dismantling and verifying the North's Yeongbyeon Nuclear Complex will be the priority, as it's a key facility that produces both plutonium and uranium, two essential materials for making nuclear weapons. Kim mentioned it in the Pyongyang Joint Declaration last September. U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun also recently said at Stanford University that Kim pledged to shut it down. And ideal concessions from the U.S. could involve declaring an end to the Korean War and setting up a liaison office in Pyongyang. North Korea has also been demanding sanctions relief, but that would likely require a bolder step than destroying the Yeongbyeon complex. These were among the issues discussed in Pyongyang last week by Biegun and its North Korean counterpart, Kim Hyok-chol. The two sides are scheduled to continue their working-level negotiations in a third Asian country next week. Their second round of talks should help lay the groundwork for the two leaders' joint statements and determine whether the second summit has more substance than the first. According to the Blue House, South Korean President Moon Jae-in is also expected to discuss a summit with President Trump, likely over the phone next week. How President Moon mediates between the two sides will also be an important variable that could determine the success of the upcoming Vietnam summits. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Russia is considering sending 50,000 tons of wheat to North Korea as part of humanitarian aid. Citing a Russian lawmaker, the Interfax news agency said such A measure comes at the request of Pyongyang, which explained it's still trying to cope with natural disasters. According to a UN report in December last year, the north faces food shortages after scorching heat last summer and extensive flooding. Russia continues to provide food aid to North Korea via international organizations like the UN and has provided some $8 million from last year until now through the World Food Programme. In other news, Seoul has been selected as South Korea's candidate city for a joint Olympic bid with North Korea. Seoul beat out Busan in the race. The two Koreas have agreed to join forces to try and bring the 2032 Games to the Korean Peninsula. Our Lee Seung-jae with the details.
The Korean Sports and Olympic Committee on Monday announced that Seoul was chosen as the candidate city for the 2032 Summer Games at its General Assembly at the National Training Center in Jincheon, Chungcheongbuk-do Province. The capital earned 34 out of 49 votes from the committee members. Before the vote, Busan, the nation's second-largest city, proposed that it become a co-candidate city with Seoul, but the offer was rejected. Having hosted the 1988 Summer Olympics, Seoul now has the chance to host the event for a second time. It also gives North Korea an opportunity to host its first ever Olympics. North Korea has yet to announce its candidate city, but Pyongyang is considered a certain pick considering its infrastructure. At the presentation on Monday, Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon cited Seoul's proximity to Pyongyang and to Incheon International Airport, along with its history of various cooperative projects with North Korea. Park says Seoul will seek to hold the opening and closing ceremonies with Pyongyang simultaneously, using 5G technology. He added that thanks to Seoul's past experience of having hosted the 1988 Summer Olympics and the existing facilities from that competition, hosting another Olympics will help save costs as well. Along with the two Koreas, Germany, Australia, India, and Indonesia have shown an interest in hosting the 2032 Olympics. The International Olympic Committee narrows down the list of candidates to 3 and selects the host city 7 years in advance, meaning two Koreas will know if they win the bid in 2025. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, China's up in arms after 2 U.S. warships sailed close to islands claimed by China in the disputed South China Sea. And this is a move that could potentially negatively impact the ongoing trade talks between the two nations. They're currently happening in Beijing. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Aram. So Aram, what's the latest?
Well, Mark, the USS Spruance and USS Preble conducted what the US Navy called, as they usually do, a freedom of navigation operation within 22 kilometers of the Spratly Islands on Monday. A spokesman for the 7th Fleet said the mission was conducted in order to challenge excessive maritime claims and preserve access to the waterways as governed by international law. Such exercises have often been carried out by the US Navy and have been the cause of diplomatic tensions between Washington and Beijing. China's foreign ministry, unsurprisingly, issued an angry response.
Relevant activities of the U.S. warships violated China's sovereignty and damaged peace, security, and good order in relevant waters. China expresses firm opposition and dissatisfaction to this.
The spokesperson also demanded the US stop what she called its provocative actions, adding her country will take necessary actions to protect state sovereignty. Beijing's warning came as officials from both sides were in the Chinese capital for a new round of trade talks this week. It remains to be seen if Monday's operation will impact those negotiations. China claims most of the energy-rich South China Sea, as do several of its neighbors, including the Philippines, Vietnam and Taiwan. China's claim was largely discredited by an international arbitration tribunal 3 years ago, but Beijing has rejected that ruling. The Chinese military has since bolstered its presence in the region, deploying military hardware and other defense systems. Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman says a global recession is on the horizon, going against other experts who believe the growth slowdown will not turn into an outright recession. Speaking at the World Government Summit in Dubai, Krugman said there's a good chance that a recession will come this year or next, citing factors such as the deflating tech bubble and what he called President Trump's not very effective tax cut stimulus. CFOs in North America predict a recession by 2020, while economists surveyed several months ago said one would hit by 2021. Italy is currently in recession, with Germany said to be on the brink as the European Commission downgraded its growth forecasts last week. Tens of thousands of Iranians have taken to the streets to mark the 40th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. State TV showed crowds braving the snow, shouting, "Death to Israel, death to America," with some protesters burning American flags. In the capital's Azadi Square, President Hassan Rouhani dismissed US efforts to isolate Tehran while touting his country's military might.
We will continue along the path we have chosen, and we will develop our military power. I also want to share with you that the world has been in awe of Iran's military power and its capabilities over the last 40 years, and especially in the last 5 years.
Since the revolution, Iran has become more divided. The hardliners, who believe in the strict implementation of laws from 40 years ago, continuously clash with the reformists, who are pushing for more economic transparency. US sanctions have hit Iran's economy hard, angering low-income Iranians who have carried out sporadic protests and strikes over the past year. A recent study shows the number of insects around the world is declining rapidly, adding such a trend could have what it calls a catastrophic effect on the environment. The study, published in the journal Biological Conservation, claims more than 40% of insect species, including bees, ants and beetles, could become extinct in the next few decades. Researchers suggest such a decline could cause the collapse of the planet's ecosystems, with a devastating impact on life on Earth. The main reason for the drop is loss of habitat, caused mostly by agricultural practices, urbanization, as well as climate change.
Thank you as always to Honorary for the world news there. Now, President Moon Jae-in is chairing a cabinet meeting as we speak. We are hearing that he will directly address the significance of and his expectations for the regulatory sandbox that's being implemented for the very first time in an effort to boost the sluggish economy we're going through here in South Korea. The meeting comes a day after the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy announced its approval of regulatory exemption applications from 4 companies. The initiative intends to cultivate a friendlier environment to develop new industries by exempting or suspending regulations for a certain period of time. Now, President Moon has earlier said the system should be based on the premise that anything will be approved as long as it poses no direct danger to the lives, safety and health of the people. So, as we just touched upon there, the South Korean government is set to slash red tape after reviewing business cases under its recently introduced regulatory sandbox program. Officials say they hope this process will be a test bed to help South Korea's industrial sector develop new, innovative products as well as services. Kim Jeon reports.
The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said Monday it held its first review of new business models that are subject to a regulatory sandbox, or the mechanism aimed at keeping up with the fast pace of innovation by offering regulatory waivers for product and service testing during a set time period. One of the 4 cases that were reviewed and given the green light was submitted by Korea's biggest automaker, Hyundai Motor. The company aimed at the installation of hydrogen charging stations, which was previously limited due to municipal regulations. Among the 5 locations requested by Hyundai for the installation of the charging stations, 4 that have been granted approval are located in downtown Seoul, including one in the National Assembly, and they were approved for the benefit of the public.
Up until now, regulations have limited the building of gas facilities near industrial and residential areas. There is a requirement of designating a charging site that's more than 3,000 square meters in the city building process, as well as the limitation in the use of charging stations in public properties that are not related to public services.
Other cases involve the genomic profiling of individuals in order to prevent degenerated diseases like Parkinson's disease, as well as the installation of LCD and LED panels on the exterior of buses for advertisements. The latter involves the use of outlets in charging electric vehicles, in which consumers would pay for the amount of electricity used to charge their EVs, based on a smartphone app. The regulatory measures that were given the green light at Monday's meeting are limited to the specific companies that have applied for them for a period of 2 years. In the meantime, the ministry says it'll work on amending the country's regulations so that more companies can benefit from such deregulatory measures. The ministry says the next such meeting to review business cases for the implementation of the regulatory sandbox will be held later this month. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, a bunch of new figures show the inventory of South Korean manufacturers has hit its highest point in about 2 decades. And experts say it's yet another clear indication that the country's economy is slowing down sharply. Kim Hae-sang reports.
South Korea's manufacturing sector inventory to sales ratio for December recorded 116%, marking the highest level since September 1998. A rising ratio means a faster buildup in inventories than goods sold, usually indicating a slowing economy. Data from Statistics Korea show the ratio has been spiking since late last year. After hitting around 107% in October, it soared past 111% in November.
The higher ratio signals a slowing economy and even recession. As inventories grow, companies start producing less. Investment shrinks further, leading to an economic contraction. In particular, auto and semiconductor sales have been falling in recent months, mainly due to sluggish exports and the slowing Chinese economy.
South Korea's manufacturing sector factory operating rate recorded 73% in December, the lowest level in 8 months. As for Korean automakers, shipments plunged 7% on month in December, while their combined inventory ratio rose 6.5%. Semiconductor shipments dropped 5%, while their warehouse stock rose 4%. Shipments of primary metals, including steel, fell 2.5%, while inventory jumped more than 3%. Kim Hae-sang, Arirang News.
Now, as we speak, an honorary graduation ceremony is being held for the 250 student victims from Danwon High School who died during the tragic Sewol-ho ferry disaster in April 2014. The event began a few minutes ago at the school in Ansan City, southwest of Seoul, with some 500 people in attendance, including Seoul Mayor Park Won-soo, Education Minister Yoon-hae, and friends and family members of the victims. The school's principal said it will continue to commemorate the victims every year and remember their sacrifice forever. Today's graduation ceremony is being held 3 years after when the victims were originally expected to graduate, as the bereaved families refused to attend the ceremony until the bodies of 2 missing students were recovered. South Korea's former Supreme Court chief, Yang Sung-tae, has been indicted on 47 charges, most of which are related to abuse of power. He is the first top-level official in South Korea's judiciary, sitting or former, to ever be indicted. Che Xiang reports.
The Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office handed over former Supreme Court Chief Justice Yang Sung-tae to the court on Monday. He is facing 47 charges, including interfering in highly sensitive trials, like the ones related to Japan's use of Korean forced labor during World War II, to achieve his long-envisioned plan of establishing a separate court of appeals and creating a blacklist of judges who opposed his plan. He is also accused of illegally securing records of judges' deliberations at the Constitutional Court of Korea, an independent high court that rules on constitutional issues. The prosecutors suspect that Yang used those records to prevent them from ruling contrary to Supreme Court precedent. Yang is also accused of creating slush funds during his tenure. By the end of this month, prosecutors plan to carry out additional investigations to indict other former and sitting judges involved in the power abuse scandal during Yang's leadership of the judiciary, which should wrap up their 8-month probe. 2 other former Supreme Court justices, Park Byung-dae and Ko Young-han, have been indicted as Yang's accomplices. They face 33 and 18 charges, respectively. 최시영, Arirang News.
Now, let's lighten the tone somewhat. More and more people in South Korea are spending time and money on cultural programs and events, which is wonderful news, of course. But a closer look reveals the frequency of attending such events is still very closely linked to household income. Kim Mo-kyun reports.
The number of Koreans attending cultural and arts events has risen dramatically in recent years, with the figure surpassing 80% of the population for the first time last year. According to a survey released by the Culture Ministry on Monday, the rate of public attendance at such events peaked. The frequency of visits to cultural and arts events also increased to an average of 5.6 times a year from 5.3 times in 2016. Movies had the highest attendance rate with 76%. Next were music and art performances with 21%, followed by art exhibitions. By age, people in their 20s had the highest attendance rate, followed by those in their teens and 30s. When it comes to income, the ratio between household income and attendance for cultural events remained proportional. Households with a monthly income higher than $4,500 had attendance rates higher than 90%, while the figure dropped to 43% for those who earn less than $890 a month. The ministry said that it plans to create more opportunities for everyone to enjoy cultural events by increasing cultural subsidies for low-income households and by creating more social infrastructure in the sector. The survey was conducted on more than 10,000 people aged about 15 years old nationwide from October to November last year. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
Good morning. Readings will go up slightly higher than yesterday, hovering right around the seasonal averages. But temperatures will remain on the chillier side again for next couple of days. But we are seeing some fine dust blowing into the country. Westerly winds will bring with them toxic dust, increasing the fine dust levels over central, western regions and Jeollado provinces. So be sure to check the dust levels before heading out today. The daily highs will be a few notches higher than on Monday, rebounding to positive territory in most areas, with Seoul getting up to 4 degrees Celsius this afternoon, with a dry weather warning remains in place here in the capital. And there's a mix of rain and snow in the forecast for Friday, and that should help to relieve the dryness in the air. And due to the relatively mild winter weather we had, this year, we're expecting spring flowers to bloom 3 to 5 days earlier than normal. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Tuesday morning here in Seoul. Do stay tuned to us on Arirang TV. Plenty more coming up, including our next newscast at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. That's coming up in around 90 minutes from now. So until then, goodbye.